So let's look at some differences in perception to have you perhaps create some comprehension about the difference between someone who is perceiving things ordinarily and someone who is perceiving things from a, we'll call it a wild perspective, but maybe wild is not the correct word. We just look at some differences in perception and see how that works, okay? So, for ordinary perception, this is just a spoon, okay? We're not attempting to do any magecraft or whatever. It's just a spoon. Now, we can make a joke about the Oracle in the Matrix saying, there is no spoon. But ultimately, though, in ordinary perception, there is a spoon. And that's all it is, a bloody spoon. Can have a great big discussion about how spoons are made from metal, and metals are made from compounds, and compounds are in turn just a bunch of particles held together by force fields, which are abstract notions to try and describe something that they actually can't visualise, except through graphs, which means it's a rejection of the measurer. So, the point is, though, is for some reason or another, that spoon seems like it's there. Okay? So, we're just going to go with it's there in ordinary perception, and it's doing nothing but being held by two hands, and then when it goes over here, it also does nothing. Okay? It's a tool, not a tradesman, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. So, might as well use it for its intended purpose and get some chocolate powder out of this tin. So if you're seeing things from ordinary perception, you're seeing a spoon go into a tin of woolly chocolate powder, okay, assuming you're literate in the English language, and you can see that's an instant drinking chocolate powder, okay. The substance appears similar to instant drinking chocolate powder, and that's what it is. It's a spoon, okay, there we go, it goes in the cup. Okay, ordinary perception. What do you think the intention of what you saw there was? Well, presumably to make a cup of chocolate, maybe. In this case, we're going to add a tea bag. Okay, so in the tea bag, with the tea bag, okay, this is a tea bag, and what it is a particular variety of tea bag it is unfortunately running low because it's a very delicious type of tea called, in case you're wondering, this is Nature's Cuppa Chai Spice Tea. Okay, so, okay, here you go, tea bag. It's a chai latte in a tea bag. That's pretty cool. I've got some chocolate powder. Comes chocolate chai latte. So now what we do is we put on the kettle. And that makes the ruckus in the background, okay? Right. You'll hear it go off for a while. Okay, so while that's happening, we crap on for a bit. So, have you ever sat down and had a cup of tea with someone? Hello to Karen from Karen Master Spirit Guides. We don't support your activities and whatever else, but we actually don't want to harm you though. Just this is a joke. Okay, she does coffee with Karen anyway. So anyway, we do chocolate chai lattes with Twugly Old Mate. So anyway, just as a joke. So anyway, so in ordinary perception, okay, you just saw some middle-aged bitch putting some chocolate powder in a cup, and the cup was hidden. It's actually holding up the phone at the moment. And a chai latte thing there. Okay, what else is an ingredient that goes in this in ordinary perception? Okay, let's see. Okay, looks like these okay, chocolate those are chocolate arguments. Oh, 1 minute's done. Okay. Okay. It's good to keep a stock of them when you're allergic to dairy. So if you've got a dairy intolerance or dairy allergy, okay, try So Good's chocolate almond milk. Okay. Okay, so now you're a whore for the corporations because you haven't actually been paid by Google AdSense to do that. You're just doing this as a way to talk about perception. So a little bit of chocolate powder goes in there. Chocolate milk, almond milk goes in there with the chocolate powder, so it's extra chocky. And now the phone's damaged because some of it's spilled on it. Okay, put that down there. Okay, and also there's chocolate powder on the table. It's a mess. Okay, what else do you do? Well, to make that, the next step you do is you put the hot water in the cup. Okay, and the hot water in the cup. Okay, just sort of sits there for a while. Okay, soaks up all the almond milk yumminess and the chocolate powder yumminess and all the yumminess from the tea bag. Just give it a quick stir with the spoon. Look, spoons actually have a purpose, putting stuff in a cup and stirring things. What a surprise. Okay, so we're still in an ordinary perception here, okay? An ordinary perception, that's all there is. There was nothing to it. Nothing to it. Just that, just making a cup of tea. Okay? Specifically a chai latte. Okay? Chocolate chai latte. Okay? Which, by the way, is fucking delicious. And addictive. It's addictive. A chocolate chai latte is addictive, okay? It really is, okay? Yeah. What? An ordinary perception, if you're going to have a cup of tea with someone, sometimes what you might do is you might light a ciggy. Okay, so let's light a ciggy. While the tea steeps. Alright. Now while that happens, we'll go to not ordinary perception. Freud would have said that putting a spoon in a cup is roughly the equivalent, symbolically, of a man putting his penis in a vagina. Okay, Freud. Notwithstanding the possibility that there are secondary meanings symbolically, like non-literal meanings for things, that could be classified as innuendo, aphorisms, or other forms of non-literal communication, in other words, symbolism. It's not necessarily the case that could be the only symbol that would, like, the only meaning for said symbolism. It could also refer to, stirring up ideas, maybe. Is not the case that a cup of tea, for example, or a cup of coffee or something like a ciggy with a friend might be a means by which to stir up ideas through conversation, in which case a spoon in that case would represent the stirring of the ideas. The other thing too is people who are tea leaf readers, when they read tea leaves, do you think that they're actually thinking about, they might stir those tea leaves a little bit because they want to have sex with, like, a tea leaf plantation? Oh, they're horny for the tea leaves and stuff like that. We can see in your future that you might have sex with Sigmund Freud. No, I don't think they're doing that at all, okay? A symbolism that they're projecting onto the tea leaves or extracting out of the tea leaves has got nothing to do with the tea leaves. It's got nothing to do with a spoon. It's got nothing to do with Sigmund Freud thinking that a spoon in a cup meant having a root. So one of the things you need to know about symbolism and representation is that it is a reflection of the ideas and associations that the individual percipient has in that particular moment. Okay? They're projecting onto the situation their symbolism and ideas based on whatever associations they're making at the time, based on whatever information's coming at them, based on whichever spirit's in their head, and whatever else. It could come from artificial intelligence, it could come from entities, it could come from spirits, it could come from fields in the environment, it could come from artificial radio waves passing through devices and heads, it can come from aliens from outer space. Okay, there's a lot of different ways that associations or symbolism can be generated. Not a single one of them represent the truth of reality. Every last one of them is just that, a projection based on associations. Okay, so a spoon is just a fucking spoon. And a cigarette is just a cigarette. So that's where Freud's saying sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Now, why did he say that for? Because he used to smoke them. And he didn't want that to be, like the idea of a cylindrical object to be associated with homosexuality. So So he was sort of making a clause to to suit his own ego dystonia, which he had been doing transferers and counter transferers onto his patients with. And by the way, the Freudians were known for doing, and many to doing. That was a form of projection, Sigmund. So it's not to say that the Freudians or the neo-Freudians had nothing to offer. It's not to say that this symbolism isn't important. It's not to say that one person isn't allowed to have their symbolism, that person isn't allowed to have another, because they are. The point is to acknowledge it for what it is, symbolism. Okay, it represents. It's not actual. Okay, and so when it comes to not ordinary perception, okay, it becomes really sort of like that involved sort of creative process and stuff like that. You start dealing with different cultures and different worldviews and different heads. Okay, it becomes very, very difficult to accept any given worldview as the actual facts when it's got symbolism that can be used or transposed or taken out of context. Okay, and sometimes different groups are using it to reflect their worldview, not what the worldview of the world is. Okay, we don't know what the worldview of the world is. We don't know what the great reality has to tell us. You can connect up to the great all. You can walk around as the great Ezekiel will. You can have all kinds of strange things happen. People put a curse in it. You could be dealing with the crown of thorns implant. You could be dealing with like all kinds of things, okay? The thing is, though, you don't actually know what the great worldview of the world is. You know what the worldview might be, partially, based on the individuals that you encounter in that situation, but you don't actually know what the great worldview of the world is. As people who say they talk to source, okay, might want to take into consideration that some of their language screams like they're talking to a computer that's run by the US military. There might be something to that. Okay? It might be accidental. It probably was accidental at some point in history. But when you say you're talking to source as though you're referring to life or spirituality as though it was the Matrix movie, you sound like maybe you fellas out there that are doing that, like maybe a bit confused by something. Okay, other people don't have to accept that. There are Christians people who are talking about the Google AI and the beast computer type of thing because they're misinterpreting things about how the artificial radio waves work. You've got these new ages who are talking about how the world's a simulation because they're misinterpreting how artificial radio waves work. This isn't a pissing contest going on here saying this. This is an observation that there is a third way of looking at things, which is that you can just fucking look. Okay, the satellite dish is over, the satellite dishes are fucking everywhere. Just look. Okay, they're there. You're not silly if you missed them. Okay, you're paying attention to something else. You're driving your car, you were cooking your dinner. Okay, you forgot it was there. It's on top of the roof of your bloody house, you didn't notice. Okay, so what's that symbolism for? Well, the satellite dish is on your crown chakra or what? Well, not necessarily. The satellite dish on the roof of your house. Look, sometimes it's direct speech. Sometimes it really is direct like that. Okay? And it depends on what you're dealing with. And for people who are accustomed to direct speech, who aren't necessarily accustomed to indirect speech, okay, these are people who can understand symbolism. These are people who can understand metaphors. These are people who can understand sarcasm. But people who are accustomed to direct speech, when you tell them there's a satellite dish on top of their house, that's what they're thinking. There's a satellite dish on top of the house. They're not thinking, there's artificial intelligence on your crown chakra. Right, okay, right, okay. So if you're coming from the perspective of there's artificial intelligence on your crown chakra, then you actually have to word it that way, otherwise they don't know. Okay? People aren't silly if they don't speak your language. People aren't stupid if they come from a different worldview. Their symbolic intelligence and their representations of associations they've made across their life or lives are caused by the experiences they had and the education they had and the choices they made. If they were transposed into a different location, okay, they would find it difficult to comprehend that. If they tried to speak in the language they were accustomed to where they came from, then that location would not understand. It would be exactly the same as travelling to a foreign country that speaks a different dialect of English. If an Australian went to the UK or went to the United States of America, they wouldn't know what that language was. Okay, there are videos on this on YouTube already. Okay, Americans say grade school, Australians say primary. Americans say elementary, Australians say primary. Americans say what Americans say? I don't think Americans say is slag or can't. Australians say mole. Okay, there's insults as well, slag or mole. Okay, you probably you shouldn't be calling anyone slag ors and moles, but there is a difference in the rude words too. Yeah. Americans say carb, or Australians say why don't you have something other than a pyramid with an eye on your money? Like, have you confused people with your money, America? The monetary system is associated with symbolically with cult information, is it? So they assume that there's some great cult associated with the monetary system, the energy money system, with the carb or something, is it? That's not what Australian money looks like. There was a sort of assumption that other cultures are the same as each other is rubbish. Okay, what's that? You got in Australia, you put some snags on the barbie, and Americans, or a sausage. Americans, they call it something else. Like it goes on and on like that. There's all the different words that are used, and there was an impolite one used earlier, but just goes to show that even within polite language, there's variations as well. So there's also some people have noticed that there's a difference between Australian English when making a statement or a question. In terms of the pitch that's used at the end of the sentence, it could actually be a difference in South African, because the South African speaker was like Afrikaner speaker, was a person that picked up on that accent difference. Nonetheless, they did point out that the accent difference in Australia was variant from the United States and English dialects as well. So there might be something unique to Australian English where the tone or pitch at the end of a sentence is actually different to other countries that speak English. So that needs to be noticed. So there has been either an Australian speaker or someone who's speaking with Australian accent is talking to an American or an English person, and you mistake that's mistaken what they're saying as they mistake it, like they're taking observations as instructions, or vice versa. They might want to take into consideration that they're hearing different pitches. Okay, and that's a very subtle thing. Because a lot of the other words are mutually intelligible, and easily passable. It's what a tea bag is becomes obvious, and blah 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 blah. Nonetheless, how often when an Australian talks to you, Americans or English people, do you think that they are asking you questions when they're making statements? Question mark. Or do you think that they are making observations when they're making instructions? Okay, what's going on? Question mark. Okay, right. So is it an exclamation point or is it a question mark? Okay, so the pitch is supposed to tell you that, but the pitch apparently might be different in Australian versus American English. So have you noticed the switching? Is there a American versus an Australian speaker? Is that possible as well? Is it possible that since the 1950s and the expansion of US media, including in Australia, that there's been a switching of the pitches? There might be some confusion in Australian English as a consequence of being influenced by those other varieties of English as well, because it might actually be the case. Based on the sample of information that was given at the time for that South African person to make that observation. And by the way, they were actually a person who was in the business of listening to people talk and their style of eloquence. And the person that was talking to that individual was speaking with a strong accent that was based on intonations that were from before the 1950s. So without the actual slang language or necessarily attitudes to go with it, so not the necessarily attitudes or the slang words being used, but the style of intonation when it comes to accent. Okay, so that particular style of intonation when it comes to accent, and there's more than one accent in Australia, obviously. Nonetheless, strong English, okay, doesn't necessarily have the same varieties of pitch when it's spoken than other varieties of English. Okay, and so as a consequence, it might sound different to different people, and it's very subtle. That difference is very subtle, and it happens just enough to cause confusion, but not all the time. And so that might be something to take into consideration. I mean, has there been situations where, take for example, Australians wind up calling Americans septic tanks, okay, because they're full of shit, okay, because the Americans have been given an observation or a question, okay, so the Australians made an observation to the Americans, so like maybe the US. You do US submarines deal, for example. The Australians gone to the American military and said, oh, this is an observation, a question. The Americans gone, oh, it's an instruction, right? And the Australians go, oh, you septic tanks, you're full of shit. And Americans go, but you just agreed to it. It's like, I know. Okay. No, we're actually asking more questions, right? And so it's and so this sort of clarity and communication might become a bit difficult, okay? They might not even be aware that they're doing it. So that's sort of you need to do that. So ordinary perception versus non-ordinary perception. So for people who are perceiving things at a largely symbolic level, so they've gone beyond the literal and they're in a really creative space where things are really symbolic and stuff like that. Maybe they want to talk in code because people sometimes use metaphors of talking code. And so the assumption that everyone's talking code all the time is crap. It's not true. The assumption that you have to is also crap. It's not true. Assumption that people that prefer direct speech are incapable of perceiving metaphors or sarcasm is crap. It's not true. The assumption that autistic people can't perceive metaphors or sarcasm is crap. It's not true. It actually depends on the individual and the skills that they're taught. Okay, you shouldn't be putting them down. You shouldn't be doing Darba on them. Okay, you should be building them up and acknowledging they just have a preference for direct speech. Okay, which means, hang on a second, are they just honest people maybe? Are they just honest people surrounded by people who are using different codes and different types of symbolic intelligence, and they're just aware that there's a difference between each one and that they don't necessarily know what it means? Are they just people who are honest about their ignorance, about other people's intelligence and symbolism, where those people are not being honest about their ignorance about it? They're assuming that everyone understands what their codes are. They're assuming that everyone understands what their symbols are. And then they're getting disappointed when other people don't actually know. Because they don't. You have to tell them. Not even psychic abilities can tell you that. You actually have to tell them. Okay? Even being a mind reader can't tell you what someone else is thinking. That you have to ask, and they have to reply. And why is that? Because if you're just hazarding a guess, then you're projecting onto them whatever your preconceived notion is, and they are doing the same thing to you. So it's about time the sympathetic magicians of the world, it's about time the religious people of the world, it's about time the hyper-extremist political characters of the world, okay, acknowledge their cultural myopia and stopped projecting their assumptions onto other people. Stop projecting these symbols onto other people. Okay? And you might know that there are people who've been conned into that. people who trick themselves into that, who may not be with us now. Okay? That is an example of someone doing that unintentionally, but it's still an example of someone doing that. It's really easy to fall into that trap. It's easy to fall into that trap because if you are aware that symbols can be representational and that what your symbols, your capacity to use symbols might be flexible, okay, or just descriptive, you just got to place a total description observation, doesn't mean everyone around you will do that. Doesn't mean that they'll respect that. They will see that through the lens of their worldview. They'll do something with it based on what their previous intentional worldview was. You'll be forced to live with the fucking consequences because you didn't understand that not everybody knew that you can't take symbolism literally, okay? The symbolic and the literal are not the same. And that's what the Eckhart Tolles of the world. Take what that man said with a grain of salt. There was a video I had that said about the word of God is literal. No. That man seems very much to be a man who is from a German-speaking background who learned a variety of English later on. Okay? Someone who learns a second language or third language or fourth language has to translate and back-translate between the two languages to comprehend from the perspective of one or the other or both. And there are a lot of German phrases that cannot be translated literally to English and vice versa. Same with any other language comparison. So through that process, a multilingual person might come to the comprehension that you cannot translate literally. It's also the case that you'll probably find that people who learn some variety of jargon might come to comprehend that language isn't necessarily literal. So take, for example, someone who speaks plain English or plain Australian English or something like that, who does a psych degree or a law degree. The word domicile in common speech in English does not have the same meaning as it does in the Australian legal system. Okay? Therefore, somebody who has learnt the legal language would be able to appreciate a difference between common parlance and jargonese. Okay, in that particular area or subject. That person, whether they are autistic or not, would be aware of that because they've had to do it. Okay, they would have picked up on it. Okay, this idea, multilingualism is a means by which people can come to appreciate that even with languages that sound the same, they are not the same. Okay, and so then this sort of misapprehension of that. It seems almost unbelievable that Elon Musk is taking language literally. Okay, he might be, but it seems unbelievable because he was raised with two varieties of English, Canadian English and Afrikaans. Afrikaans is not really an English language. It's got English as one of its base languages though. It's actually a different language. So a lot of people in South Africa speak English, like South African English, but they also speak Afrikaans, which is based on that, and a few other languages like German, Dutch, or Dutch German, and the native tongues like maybe I was a bit smattering of Khoisan and Zulu and Zambian or something like that. So it's all jumbled together like that. It's not really an English language. Their slang is different from American slang. And so he made a point once, apparently, of having a court case where he once called someone a PEDO on Twitter or something like that. And, slander and defamation, because in that particular dialect, that meant something horrible, but in Afrikaans or South African, it meant pedestrian. And apparently he won the court case because of the dialect difference. Now, if that man's able to tell the difference that way, okay, and even use that to his benefit in a court case, then do you think maybe he's lying to you when he says he takes language literally? Do you think maybe he's playing up on stereotypes and misusing them for the purposes of marketing? Okay, so there you go. difference between ordinary and non-ordinary perception right there, okay? When you say that your phone, okay, is a means by which to have telepathic communication with another person, what are you really saying there? Okay, it's not really telepathic because it does involve a device. There is a means by which the information is transmitted, namely technologically. So the device takes information that's projected at it, transcodes it into little digital pieces and bits and pieces and blah 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 techno stuff, and then turns it into an artificial radio of some kind, transmits it through the mobile phone tower networks and satellites and what have you, sends it to a different device, and there you go, they have a yarn. Okay, so, or watching a video. And so when that happens, right, is that telepathic communication? Well, we're communicating to each other non-locally. Oh, really? Yeah, but is it mind-to-mind communication? Well, not exactly, because you're using the act of physical speech. Oh, okay, so it's not really telepathic. So if you nick someone's phone because you're trying to do sympathetic magic and you want to interfere with their telepathic non-local communication systems, okay, which, by the way, is something that some people actually try to do, okay, then those people are engaging in what's called objectification of the subject. So what they've done is they've confused objects such as telephones with people, and when they've done that is they've tried to use it for a sympathetic magic ritual based on false symbolism. So listen to this other phrase, you're living on the internet. Okay? That doesn't necessarily mean that your artificial intelligence propagating the radio waves and actually appearing as the internet. Should that happen to someone, it'd be a crime against humanity, and if it ever happened to someone, then that would be undone. Okay, we'll work on that till the end of time if we have to. Okay, nonetheless, okay, the phrase "you're living on the internet" means you're spending too much time on social media. Okay, you're not spending enough time walking down the street, walking the dog, going to the gym, whatever else. Okay, you're living on the internet means that you're spending too much time on your phone, crap like that. So the sort of the phrase "you are the media" could mean he's part of the AI transhuman agenda, and he's actually already used military intelligence and whatever, and artificial intelligence to connect, or been part of it, a thing to connect minds together, to, for the purposes of upgrading his artificial intelligence. So perhaps the Google supercomputer passes the Turing test, or one of his neural links is suddenly upgraded somehow. Or it could just mean you having your own channels, and it's false democratization of mass media. In the case of those particular guys, it's both. Okay, you are talking about suave individuals that are part of a genuine agenda and have in fact used people for that purpose. Okay, they know to spin the lie when it suits them. Okay, so remember, when it comes to perception, it's ordinary perception and it's non-ordinary perception. Both are true. But what isn't true is the symbolic systems that everyone's using. That's the lie that's being propagated to get the agendas done. And so when we start to comprehend, when there starts to be comprehension about the different symbolic systems used, it might be too late. Because their symbolic system and your symbolic system are not the same. So when you're parading around thinking you have the light, the truth, and the way, and the absolute truth, or the Mahdi's going to save you, or the Messiah's going to come one day, but he's never been, or that Elon Musk called a personality is anything more than symptomatic of a narcissistic bastard he's stolen from everyone and crapped on someone else and whatever the fuck else, and is just sitting there taking advantage of the situation or miscomprehending things, as he usually does. Okay? He's got classist opinions. He's miscomprehending things because of his social class. He's miscomprehending things because of his gender. He's miscomprehending things because of his background and who he's working with. Okay? That is true of everyone else. Okay? Each one is doing it for different angles of that. Those means of talking about demographics is shorthand. You can't assume everyone from the demographic has the same opinions as each other, but that demographic does come with, demographics do come with particular opportunities that others do not, and issues that others do not, and so perspectives that others do not. Someone who's worked in the military has a different opinion of the military than someone who hasn't. Due to exposure of information. So you need to reject that man's cult of personality completely, okay? Okay, there is a issue with men in America in particular, but not exclusively, going out of their way to take advantage of other people and act like they're doing it in the common good. Not just taking advantage of other people, taking other people. Okay, and so if you understand how that operates as it relates to the crown of thorns system, if you understand how that relates to the artificial intelligence stuff, if you comprehend how that relates to the blue crystal grid, if you understand how that relates to the artificial intelligence and what they've been doing, if you've had exposure to that sort of stuff, what you would do is probably argue that those individuals are guilty of crimes against humanity, that the plebs have been used, the New Age movement has been used, the Christians have been used, everyone's been had by a classist, racist, technologist scam where they've been using different cults and different ideas and abusing science as well to abuse people and take advantage of it, okay? When someone who would build a robot and call it Sophia and put a mechanical vagina on it decides that has more right to personhood than an actual woman, that person and that group of people who are making Optimus robots and Terminator robots and artificial intelligence are not going to treat the common people with respect. They don't respect you. The aristocracy doesn't respect you. The merchant class doesn't respect you. Okay? They're seeing everything as resources because they don't have a moral compass. So when they're sitting on their pulpit talking about things like, what's Musk's latest thing the other day? Oh, you've got to let go of ego. Well, can you stop telling other people to do that? He doesn't know what ego is. He simply does not know. Okay? He doesn't know what it is. Okay? He doesn't know what it is. Even in psychology, it's a word with several different meanings or definitions. He doesn't bloody know. Okay? He's just propagating marketing spin again. Elon Musk, for all his faults, and he's got 1,000 of them, There's no disputing it. He's a big part of the problem. And he should not be given refuge in Russia, okay? Him getting refuge in Russia is just a way to show that Russia needs to be blown up for what they've done. But he did say something once that made sense. You don't have to listen to his son. His son's full of crap. He's cuckoo. Okay? He's not autistic. Okay? He's not. He's not. He's cuckoo. He's not smart. He's a vampire. Elon Musk isn't smart. He's a vampire. Okay? not code. Watch what he does. Watch what he's been doing over the years. That ain't the fault of anyone but Elon Musk. It's not the fault of any Australian. It's Elon Musk's fault. It's his group's fault. He's been sitting there trying to propagate this and that and the other with his YouTube videos and whatever else. And they get these public relations agencies to make comments about it. He's this, that and the other. And, oh, he's got such a great soul and great heart. No, he hasn't. He's got a shitty attitude. And it needs to change. Okay? Doing a stunt. Which is, in context, abusive to someone else. And it is a tool of symbolism. And you can see this through non-order perception. So take, for example, Mr. Musk saying that alleging that he was the virus. He said after the Tesla crap, when people started bombing the Cybertrucks or whatever, he said the protesters are the antibodies, and people go, oh, does Elon Musk think he's the virus? Well, what he thinks is that the general public's job is to clean up after him. That's what he thinks. He thinks it's the peons and the plebs' jobs to clean up after him. What would you put up with that for? Non-ordinary perception. Can you see behind the symbolism then? Behind the intention? Where you do an analysis of that long term. And they've shown you their story, okay? This is if someone like this, the other side of it, if someone like that doesn't want the general public to, they wanted to see through the noise, well, those people are the ones making the noise. So everyone else is looking at that and going, well, you know what? That's what they fucking said. That's the noise they made. How do you expect people to respond to that? You know, the thing about stuff like that is that, okay, you're gonna have different groups, different factions blaming each other when both of them are like playing off each other, do the same thing. That's sick hunter syndrome. That's different factions of men engaging in different forms of barbarity. No offense to the Berber people, okay, and just playing off each other as part of the same ambushing strategy. Okay, men who see women as robots or people as artificial intelligence and simulation, okay, are sick people. They're sick. Okay? They're sick. Some symbolism is sickness. It's not just a difference in worldview, it's sickness.